Hi there, welcome to Fantasy Hub. I'm Mia, your storyteller. Today's story is filled with heartache, discovery, and a twist you won't see coming. So let's begin.
Let me paint you a picture. Picture a courtroom where the air is thick with tension, where every word could make or break someone's future. That was my world. I was a prosecutor, one of the best, they said. Sharp as a blade, cold as winter ice. I built my reputation on being unbreakable, untouchable. But everyone has their weakness, don't they? Mine walked into that courtroom on a Tuesday morning wearing a perfectly tailored navy suit and the kind of confidence that could cut glass. Cameron Brooks, defense attorney extraordinaire. The moment she stepped through those doors, I knew my life was about to get complicated. The case was high-profile embezzlement, fraud, the works. I had my evidence lined up like chess pieces, each one precisely placed for maximum impact. But Cameron? She dismantled my case piece by piece with surgical precision. I watched her work, and despite myself, I was impressed. Hell, I was more than impressed. I was captivated. She had this way of moving around the courtroom like she owned it, like every step was calculated 3 moves ahead. Her arguments were poetry disguised as law, and when she smiled, which she did whenever she scored a point against me, it was like she knew exactly how much it affected me. The jury deliberated for 3 days. 3 days where I paced my office, reviewed my notes obsessively, and tried not to think about the way Cameron's eyes sparkled when she caught me staring during cross-examination. When the verdict came back not guilty on all counts, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: defeat. Real, crushing defeat. But as I packed up my briefcase, trying to salvage what was left of my pride, Cameron approached me. "Good game, counselor," she said, extending her hand. I looked at that hand, manicured, steady, sure, and felt a jolt of electricity when our palms touched. "I don't lose," I said, probably more defensive than I intended. Her smile was dangerous. "Everyone loses sometimes. It's what you do after that counts." I should have walked away then. Should have chalked it up to professional rivalry and moved on to the next case. But something about Cameron Brooks had gotten under my skin, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. 2 weeks passed. 2 weeks of sleepless nights and restless days, of catching myself thinking about navy suits and dangerous smiles at the most inappropriate moments. I tried to bury myself in work, but even the stack of new cases on my desk couldn't distract me from the memory of that handshake, that electric touch. That's when I found myself at Murphy's, a dive bar downtown where lawyers went to drink away their sorrows and celebrate their victories in equal measure. The lighting was dim, the whiskey was cheap, and the company was usually non-existent exactly. What I needed. I was on my second glass, staring into the amber liquid like it held all the answers to my problems when I heard it. The soft click of wood against wood. I looked up to find a chessboard sliding across the scarred wooden table, followed by a pair of familiar hands setting up the pieces with practiced ease. "You owe me a rematch," Cameron said, settling into the seat across from me with that same infuriating confidence she displayed in court. I raised an eyebrow, trying to ignore the way my pulse quickened at the sight of her. "I don't owe you shit." But even as the words left my mouth, my hand was moving, pushing my pawn 2 spaces forward. King's pawn to e4 aggressive direct. Exactly the kind of opening you'd expect from a prosecutor who didn't know when to back down. Karen smiled and mirrored my move. "Sicilian defense," she murmured, and I felt that same thrill I'd experienced during our courtroom battle. The game began in earnest then. Not just the chess game, but the real game, the dance we'd started in that courtroom and were now continuing. Over 64 squares of possibility. Every move was loaded with meaning. Every captured piece a small victory or defeat that echoed our professional rivalry. "You play like you prosecute," Cameron observed after I took her bishop with perhaps more aggression than necessary. All offense, no finesse. And you play like you defend, I shot back, sliding my queen into position. Always looking for an escape route. She laughed, a sound that was far too warm for a dingy bar at 11 p.m. Not always. Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. As if to prove her point, she advanced her knight, putting my king in check with a move I hadn't seen coming. I had to castle defensive for once, and I could see the satisfaction in her eyes. The games became a regular thing. Every Tuesday and Thursday, we'd meet at Murphy's, set up the board, and wage war over alternating squares of black and white. We talked about law, about life, about everything, except the growing tension between us that seemed to thicken with every passing week. Cameron had layers, I discovered. Beneath that polished courtroom exterior was someone who'd fought for everything. She'd achieved. She'd grown up poor, worked her way through law school on scholarships and sheer determination. She chose defense work because she believed everyone deserved a fair fight, even when the system was stacked against them. That's why I became a prosecutor, I told her one evening after she'd shared a particularly difficult case involving a wrongly accused teenager. To make sure the guilty don't walk free. And I became a defense attorney to make sure the innocent don't get convicted. She replied, I suppose that makes us natural enemies. But we didn't feel like enemies. Not when she laughed at my dry observations about the legal system. Not when she brought me coffee exactly how I liked it, black, 2 sugars without me having to ask. Not when her fingers would linger just a moment too long when she captured one of my pieces, skin brushing. Skin in a way that sent shivers down my spine. The attraction was undeniable, electric, dangerous. We were on opposite sides of the law, competitors in every sense of the word. Getting involved would be complicated at best, career suicide at worst. But every Tuesday and Thursday I found myself looking forward to those games, to the verbal sparring and the way Cameron's presence seemed to make the world sharper, more vivid. Then Jacqueline entered the picture, and everything changed. Jacqueline Torres had been my law school girlfriend, my first love, my biggest mistake. Beautiful, brilliant, and utterly ruthless, she taught me that love was just another game to be won or lost. She'd graduated at the top of our class, landed a position at a prestigious firm, and broken my heart so thoroughly that it had taken years for me to trust anyone again. I hadn't seen her in 5 years when she approached me at the prosecutor's office charity gala. I was standing by the bar, nursing a glass of wine and making small talk with colleagues, when I felt a familiar presence behind me. Hope Allen, her voice was silk over steel. You look successful. I turned slowly, my lawyer's instincts immediately on high alert. Jacqueline looked exactly the same, immaculately dressed, perfectly composed. Every inch the high-powered corporate attorney she'd always dreamed of becoming. Jacqueline, I said carefully, what brings you to a prosecutor's function? Her smile was razor-sharp. Business. I represent several clients who've had encounters with your office. I like to keep track of the competition. Competition? I kept my voice level, professional, but inside, alarms were blaring. Oh, come now, Hope. We both know how this game is played. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. You always did have a type. Cold, calculating ... just like me. My blood ran cold. From across the room, I caught Cameron's. Ice feed arrived fashionably late, stunning in a black cocktail dress that made my mouth go dry. But when she saw me talking to Jacqueline, her expression darkened. Her grip on her wine glass tightened visibly. I see you've moved on, Jacqueline. Continued, following my gaze. Cameron Brooks, isn't it? Impressive choice. Though I have to wonder, does she know about your ... history? Your tendency to choose work over love. The way you destroyed us because you couldn't handle losing control? That's enough, I said, my voice sharp enough to cut glass. But Jacqueline, just smile wider, is it? Because from what I hear, you've been getting quite close to Miss Brooks. Chess games at Murphy's. Untold. How ... quaint. I hope she doesn't expect too much from you, Hope. We both know how these things end. She drifted away then, leaving me standing there with my heart pounding and my carefully constructed world suddenly feeling very fragile. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of forced smiles and meaningless conversation, but I was acutely aware of Cameron watching me from across the room, concern evident in her dark eyes. When I finally escaped to the parking lot, Cameron was waiting by my car. "Who was that?" she asked without preamble. "Nobody important," I lied. Cameron stepped closer, and in the dim light of the parking lot, I could see the hurt in her eyes. "Don't lie to me, Hope. We may be opponents in court, but I thought we were at least honest with each other." I wanted to tell her everything about Jacqueline, about the way my past had a habit of destroying my future, about how terrified I was that history was about to repeat itself. But the words stuck in my throat, trapped behind years of self-protection and hard-learned lessons about trust. "It's complicated," I said, finally. "Everything's complicated," Cameron replied. "That doesn't mean we have to face it alone." She reached out, her fingers brushing mine, and for a moment I almost gave in. Almost told her about the woman who taught me that love was a weakness, that caring too much was a sure way to get burned. Almost admitted that I was falling for her despite every logical reason why I shouldn't be. Instead, I pulled away. I should go. The hurt in her eyes deepened, but she nodded. "See you Thursday?" "Thursday," I confirmed, though I wasn't sure if it was a promise or a question. Thursday came with a vengeance, literally. A storm had blown in from the east, turning the city into a waterlogged mess of flooded streets and power outages. I was in my apartment trying to focus on case files by candlelight when someone knocked on my door. I wasn't expecting anyone, especially not in weather like this. Through the peephole, I saw Cameron standing in the hallway, soaked to the skin and clutching a manila folder against her chest like a shield. "Cameron?" I opened the door, immediately concerned. "What are you doing here?" She stepped into my apartment, leaving a trail of rainwater in her wake. "Jacqueline's digging into your past," she said without preamble, holding up the folder. "We need to talk." My stomach dropped. "How do you—" "I have sources," Cameron interrupted. "And right now, those sources are telling me that your ex-girlfriend is building a case against you, personal and professional. She's looking for anything she can use to discredit you." I stared at the folder like it might bite me. "What did she find?" "Nothing actionable," Cameron said quickly. "But she's being thorough, really thorough. She's interviewed colleagues from law school, dug up old cases, even talked to your landlord from 10 years ago. Hope, what happened between you two?" I moved to the window, watching the rain streak down the glass. The storm outside felt tame compared to the one brewing in my chest. We were together in law school. Engaged, actually. She left me 3 weeks before graduation for a job offer in New York, said love was a luxury she couldn't afford. "And now she's back," Cameron said softly. "Now she's back," I agreed. "And she doesn't like losing any more than I do." I heard. Cameron set the folder down on my coffee table, heard her shoes squelch against the hardwood as she moved closer. When I turned around, she was right there, close enough that I could smell her perfume beneath the scent of rain. "Hope," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at me." I met her eyes, and in them I saw something that terrified me more than any legal threat Jacqueline could level genuine concern. Real affection, the kind of caring that came without conditions or expectations. "Whatever she's planning, Cameron," continued, "we'll face it together. You don't have to do this alone. We? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Cameron, we haven't, this thing between us, whatever it is, it's complicated enough without what? She stepped closer, crowding me against the window. The glass was cool against my back, but the air between us felt charged, electric. Without admitting that we're more than just chess opponents, without acknowledging that every Tuesday and Thursday I count the hours until I can see you again, my breath caught. Cameron, without confessing that I think about you every time I walk into a courtroom, that I've memorized the way you bite your lip when you're concentrating, that I've fallen so hard for you I can barely think straight. The words hung between us like a challenge, like a chess move that changed the entire game. Rain lashed against the window at my back, and thunder rumbled overhead. But all I could focus on was Cameron's face in the candlelight, the way her eyes reflected my own want and fear and desperate longing. "Tell me to leave," she whispered, her voice rough with emotion. "Tell me to walk away, Hope, because if I stay, if you don't stop me right now, I'm going to." But I didn't stop her. Couldn't stop her. Instead, I reached up and cupped her face in my hands, feeling the slight dampness of rain on her skin, the warmth beneath. "Don't," I breathed. "Don't leave." The kiss was inevitable, like gravity or sunrise or the way opposing forces sometimes collide to create something beautiful. Her lips were soft and warm, and when she pressed closer, eliminating the last inch of space between us, I felt something inside my chest crack open, not breaking, but blooming. My hands fisted in her wet hair, and she made a soft sound against my mouth that sent heat racing through my veins. The folder was forgotten, the storm outside reduced to white noise. There was only Cameron, only this moment, only the way she kissed me like she was trying to memorize every second. Somehow we made it to my bedroom, leaving a trail of wet clothes in our wake. The chessboard on my dining table watched our retreat, pieces still set up for a game we'd never finished. But this wasn't about winning or losing anymore. This was about surrender mutual, willing, complete. Cameron's skin was warm against mine, her touch reverent and sure. She kissed me like she had all the time in the world, like she was determined to learn every inch of me by heart. When she whispered my name against my throat, it sounded like a prayer, like a promise, like the answer to a question I'd been too afraid to ask. We moved together in the candlelit darkness, two people who'd spent months circling each other, finally giving in to the inevitable. It was perfect and terrifying and everything I hadn't known I needed. Afterward, we lay tangled in my sheets. Cameron's head on my chest, her fingers tracing lazy patterns on my skin. The storm had passed, leaving behind the clean scent of rain and the soft patter of water dripping from the eaves. "Hope," Cameron said softly, not lifting her head. Whatever Jacqueline has planned, we'll handle it. Together." I tightened my arms around her, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. For the first time in years, I believed it might be possible. I should have known that feeling wouldn't last that morning, brought harsh reality in the form of my ringing phone. I answered without checking the caller ID, still drowsy and warm from the night before. "Hope Allen?" The voice was crisp, professional, unfamiliar. Speaking. "This is Janet Morrison from the State Bar Association. We need you to come in today. There's been a complaint filed against you, and we need to discuss some concerns about your conduct." I sat up so quickly that Cameron, still asleep beside me, stirred with a soft murmur of protest. "I'm sorry, what kind of complaint?" "I think it's better if we discuss this in person. Can you be here by 10? I glanced at the clock. It was already 8:30. "Of course. Can you tell me who filed the complaint?" There was a pause. "Attorney Jacqueline Torres." On behalf of several clients who claim prosecutorial misconduct in cases you've handled over the past 2 years. My blood turned to ice. I see, I'll be there. I hung up and immediately called my assistant, canceling all my meetings for the day. Cameron was awake now, propped up on one elbow, her dark hair tousled and her expression concerned. "What is it?" she asked. "Jacqueline," I said grimly, already reaching for my clothes. "She's filed a complaint with the Bar Association. Prosecutorial misconduct." Cameron was out of bed in an instant, reaching for her own clothes. "That's ridiculous. I've seen you work. You're meticulous, ethical. She doesn't have a case." "She doesn't need a case," I said, pulling on my suit with sharp, angry movements. "She just needs to create enough doubt to damage my reputation. In our profession, perception is everything." "Then we fight back," Cameron said fiercely. "I'll help you. We'll prove she's acting out of personal vendetta." "We?" I turned to face her, and something cold settled in my chest. "Cameron, you can't be involved in this. You're a defense attorney. If it comes out that we single quotes that we've been..." I gestured helplessly between us. Understanding dawned in her eyes, followed quickly by hurt. "You think this compromises us professionally?" "I think this makes us targets," I said. "Both of us. If Jacqueline can prove we've been personally involved while working opposing cases." "We never worked opposing cases," Cameron interrupted. "Not directly. And even if we had, there's nothing unethical about falling in love with opposing counsel?" I asked sharply. "About spending months meeting in private while we were building cases that could intersect?" "Cameron, be realistic. This looks bad." The hurt in her eyes deepened, but her voice remained steady. "So what are you saying?" I closed my eyes, hating myself for what I was about to do. "I'm saying that maybe we moved too fast. Maybe we should have thought this through before." "Before what?" Cameron's voice was dangerously quiet. "Before last night, before you kissed me back, before you told me not to leave, before we complicated our professional lives with personal feelings that we can't afford to have." I finished, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. Cameron stared at me for a long moment, and I watched as her expression shifted from hurt to anger to something harder, more distant. "I see. So this was what, a moment of weakness? A mistake you're already regretting?" "Cameron, no." She held up a hand, stopping me mid-sentence. "You know what? You're right. We did move too fast. We should have thought this through." She finished dressing quickly, efficiently, her movements sharp with suppressed emotion. "Thank you for the reminder that love is a luxury neither of us can afford." The echo of Jacqueline's words from years ago hit me like a physical blow. "Cameron, that's not what I meant." But she was already at the bedroom door. "Good luck with the Bar Association, Hope. I hope you get exactly what you deserve." The front door slammed behind her, leaving me alone in my apartment with the lingering scent of her perfume and the crushing weight of my own cowardice. The meeting with the Bar Association was every bit as bad as I'd feared. Jacqueline had been thorough in her character assassination, painting me as an overzealous prosecutor who bent rules and manipulated evidence to secure convictions. The accusations were baseless, but they were detailed and damaging. 3 cases in particular were called into question, all cases where I'd secured convictions against clients who later hired different defense attorneys for their appeals. Jacqueline claimed I'd withheld exculpatory evidence, intimidated witnesses, and engaged in prosecutorial misconduct that violated the defendant's rights. It was bullshit, and we all knew it. But proving it would take time, and in the meantime, my reputation was being dragged through the mud. By the time I left the Bar Association office, I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. The worst part was that I couldn't stop thinking about Cameron, about the hurt in her eyes when I'd essentially told her that our relationship was a mistake. about the way she'd thrown my own fears back at me before walking out. I'd handled it badly. I knew that, but knowing it and being able to fix it were two different things, especially when every instinct I had was telling me to protect myself, to build walls higher and thicker than before. That evening, I was in my office working late when my assistant buzzed me. Was Alan. "There's someone here to see you." She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. My heart leaped, thinking it might be Cameron. Instead, Jacqueline walked through my door like she owned the place, her smile sharp enough to cut diamonds. "Hello, Hope. Working late?" "I see. Trying to clean up the mess you've made?" I leaned back in my chair, not bothering to hide my contempt. "What do you want, Jacqueline?" "To give you a way out," she said, settling into the chair across from my desk, uninvited. "Drop the charges against the Martinelli case, you know, the embezzlement case that Miss Brooks so cleverly got thrown out, and I'll withdraw my complaint with the bar." "The Martinelli case is closed," I said evenly. "Double jeopardy applies. I can't refile those charges even if I wanted to. But you could ensure that no similar charges are filed against any of Martinelli's associates. You could make sure that particular investigation dies a quiet death." I stared at her, genuinely shocked. "You're asking me to obstruct justice?" "I'm asking you to be practical," Jacqueline replied. "You've always been too idealistic, Hope, too willing to tilt at windmills. Some fights aren't worth having." "And what makes you think I'd agree to this?" Her smile widened. "Because the alternative is having your career destroyed piece by piece." "Did you really think I wouldn't find out about you and Ms. Brooks?" "The chess games, the cozy dinners, the way you look at each other across courtrooms. It's all very romantic, but it's also very compromising." My blood ran cold. "There's nothing unethical about falling in love with opposing counsel while working cases that intersect, about meeting in private to discuss strategy, about letting personal feelings influence professional decisions." Jacqueline shook her head. "Oh, Hope, you always were naive." "Get out," I said quietly. "I'll give you 24 hours to think about it," Jacqueline said, rising gracefully from her chair. "After that, things get very ugly very quickly. And this time, I won't just be coming after you. Miss Brooks has built quite a reputation as an ethical defense attorney. It would be a shame to see that destroyed because of her association with you." After she left, I sat in my office until well past midnight, staring at the city lights through my window and trying to figure out how my life had gotten so complicated so quickly. Jacqueline was right about one thing: she held all the cards. But I'd learned something about playing chess with Cameron that I'd never considered before. Sometimes the best defense was a good offense. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't called in months. "Marcus? It's Hope Allen. I need a favor." Marcus Webb had been my mentor when I first started at the prosecutor's office, and he'd moved on to become an investigative journalist, specializing in legal corruption. If anyone could help me dig up dirt on Jacqueline Torres, it was Marcus. "You sure you want to go down this road, Hope?" he asked when I met him for coffee the next morning. "Because once we start digging, there's no telling what we'll find. And if she's as smart as you say she is, she's covered her tracks well." "I don't have a choice," I said. "She's not just coming after me anymore. She's threatening Cameron Brooks, and I won't let that happen." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Miss Brooks, the defense attorney? I thought you two were professional rivals." "It's complicated," I said for what felt like the 100th time in the past week. "It always is," Marcus replied with a knowing smile. "All right, I'll see what I can find. Give me 48 hours. While Marcus worked his investigative magic, I tried to focus on my other cases, but concentration was nearly impossible. Every time my phone rang, I expected it to be more bad news. Every time I walked into a courtroom, I wondered if this would be the last time I'd be allowed to practice law. The worst part was that I hadn't heard from Cameron since she'd walked out of my apartment 3 days ago. I drafted a dozen texts to her, started to call her number more times than I could count, but I always stopped myself. What could I say? That I was sorry for protecting both our careers. That I wished I was brave enough to risk everything for love. On Thursday evening, what would have been our usual chess night, I found myself at Murphy's anyway, sitting alone. At our usual table with an untouched beer and a pocket chess set. The bar was crowded, full of lawyers celebrating wins and drowning losses, but I felt completely alone. That's when she appeared. Cameron slid into the seat across from me, setting down her own beer and a manila folder that looked suspiciously like the one she'd brought to my apartment during the storm. She looked tired, like she hadn't been sleeping well, but her eyes were determined. "You look like hell," she said by way of greeting. "Thanks, you look—" I trailed off, drinking in the sight of her. Even tired and obviously stressed, she was beautiful. "What are you doing here?" "Fighting dirty," she said, opening the folder. "Just like you taught me." I blinked. "I never taught you to fight dirty." "Sure you did. Every chess game, every legal argument we've had. You showed me that sometimes when someone's playing with loaded dice, you have to flip the table." She spread papers across the table between us. "Jacqueline Torres isn't as clean as she pretends to be." I leaned forward, scanning the documents. Bank records, email transcripts, witness statements. "Cameron, how did you—" "I have sources too," she said. "And unlike some people, I'm not too proud to ask for help when I need it." The evidence was damning. Jacqueline had been taking kickbacks from clients for years, steering cases to specific judges, even bribing court clerks to delay hearings that didn't favor her clients. It was a systematic pattern of corruption that went back to her early years. In New York. "This is enough to destroy her career," I said, looking up at Cameron in amazement. "That's the idea," Cameron replied coolly. "She wants to play hardball? Let's play hardball." "Why?" I asked. "Why would you risk your own reputation to help me?" After what I said, after how I handled things, Cameron leaned back in her chair, studying me with an unreadable expression. "Do you remember what you told me about why you became a prosecutor?" "To make sure the guilty don't walk free," I said automatically. "And I became a defense attorney to make sure the innocent don't get convicted," she replied. "Well, congratulations, Hope. You've been accused of crimes you didn't commit, and I'm your defense attorney now. Whether you like it or not." I stared at her, feeling something tight and painful in my chest start to loosen. "Cameron, don't," she said sharply. "Don't apologize, don't explain, don't make this about us. This is about justice. This is about not letting bullies win just because they're willing to fight dirtier than decent people." But it was about us. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she'd put herself on the line to protect me. Cameron Brooks didn't do anything halfway, including falling in love with someone too stupid to recognize what they had until they'd almost lost it. "What do you want me to do?" I asked. Her smile was sharp as a blade. "Help me checkmate this bitch." We worked through the night, building a case against Jacqueline that was as thorough and devastating as anything I'd ever assembled as a prosecutor. Cameron had been right. She was good at fighting dirty when she had to be. By dawn, we had enough. Evidence to not only clear my name, but to ensure that Jacqueline would never practice law again. The hardest part was deciding how to play it. We could take everything to the district attorney and let the system handle it, but that would mean months of investigation, months of uncertainty, months of my reputation hanging in the balance. Or we could confront Jacqueline directly, give her a chance to withdraw her complaint and disappear quietly. "She won't go quietly," I warned Cameron as we sat in my kitchen, surrounded by evidence and empty coffee cups. "She's never backed down from a fight in her life. Then we make sure she doesn't have a choice, Cameron replied, her voice hard with determination. The meeting was set for that afternoon in Jacqueline's office. She agreed to see us, probably thinking she held all the cards that we were coming to negotiate surrender. She couldn't have been more wrong. Cameron and I walked into that gleaming corporate office like we owned it, armed with enough evidence to destroy everything Jacqueline had built. Her secretary showed us into her personal office, where Jacqueline sat behind an enormous mahogany desk that probably cost more than most people's cars. "Hope, Miss Brooks," she said with false warmth. "How unexpected. I thought you might be coming separately, given the circumstances." "The circumstances have changed," Cameron said coolly, setting her briefcase on the desk and opening it with deliberate precision. Jacqueline's confidence faltered slightly when she saw the files, the bank records, the documented evidence of her corruption spread across her expensive desk. "What is this?" "Your resignation letter," I said, sliding a single sheet of paper across to her. "Already drafted for your convenience. All you have to do is sign it." Jacqueline's face went white, then red, then white again as she scanned the evidence. I watched her realize that her carefully constructed house of cards was crumbling around her, that the blackmail and threats that had been her favorite weapons were now turned against her. "You can't prove any of this," she said, but her voice lacked its usual conviction. "We don't have to prove it in court," Cameron replied smoothly. "We just have to prove it to the Bar Association, to your clients, to the press. How long do you think your firm will keep you on when they realize you're a liability?" "You're bluffing," Jacqueline said desperately. I leaned forward, and for the first time in days, I felt like myself again, sharp, confident, in control. "Am I? You taught me that love was a luxury I couldn't afford, Jacqueline. Well, congratulations. You were right. I can't afford to love you or fear you or let you manipulate me anymore. What I can afford is to destroy you if you don't back down." The silence stretched between us, thick with tension and old wounds and the weight of consequences, finally coming home to roost. Finally, Jacqueline reached for a pen. "This isn't over," she said as she signed the resignation letter with sharp, angry strokes. "Yes, it is," Cameron said, collecting the papers and sliding them back into her briefcase. "Your complaint with the Bar Association will be withdrawn by end of business today. You'll resign from your firm, surrender your license to practice law, and disappear from Hope's life forever. In return, we won't destroy you publicly. But if you ever come after either of us again, if you so much as breathe our names in a threatening way, we'll bury you so deep you'll never see daylight again." We left Jacqueline sitting in her expensive office, staring at the ruins of her career, and walked out into the afternoon sunshine, feeling lighter than I had in days. That was... I started, then trailed off, not sure how to finish the sentence. "Effective," Cameron supplied. "Brutal, necessary." We stood on the sidewalk outside the office building, and suddenly I didn't know what to say. We'd saved my career, destroyed our mutual enemy, worked together like partners in every sense of the word. But we still hadn't talked about us, about what happened next, about whether there was still an us to talk about. "Cameron," I started. "I should go," she said, not meeting my eyes. "I have a case to prepare for tomorrow." "Wait," I caught her arm as she started to walk away. "We need to talk. About us, about what this means, what this means." Cameron said, finally looking at me, "is that we make a good team when we're fighting for the same side. But that doesn't change what you said the other morning, Hope. It doesn't change the fact that you think loving me is a mistake." "I was scared," I said desperately. "I was terrified of losing everything I'd worked for, of having my past destroy my future again. But Cameron, what I've realized is that without you, none of it matters. The career, the reputation, the success, it's all meaningless if I don't have someone to share it with." Cameron's expression softened slightly, but she didn't move closer. Fear I can understand, Hope, but you didn't just push me away, you made me feel like something to be ashamed of. Like what we had was dirty, wrong, something that needed to be hidden. The truth of her words hit me like a physical blow. That's not what I never meant, didn't you? She asked quietly. Because when push came to shove, your first instinct was to protect yourself, to choose your career over me, just like she did to you all those years ago. The parallel to Jacqueline was unavoidable, and it made me sick to realize how right Cameron was. In my panic, I'd become the very thing I'd once hated, someone who treated love like a liability instead of a gift. You're right, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I did exactly what she did. I chose safety over love, career over connection. And I'm sorry, Cameron. I'm so damn sorry. She studied my face for a long moment, and I held my breath, waiting for her verdict. Finally, she sighed. I know you are, she said. But sorry doesn't erase the hurt, Hope. It doesn't make me forget that when things got difficult, your instinct was to run. Then what do I have to do? I asked. Tell me what I need to do to fix this, and I'll do it. Cameron's smile was sad, tired. I don't know if it can be fixed. That's the problem with trust. Hope once it's broken, it's hard to put back together. Again, she walked away then, leaving me standing on the sidewalk with the taste of victory turned to ash in my mouth. I'd won against Jacqueline, saved my career, proven that I was capable of fighting dirty when necessary. But I'd lost the one thing that mattered most, and I had no one to blame but myself. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest of my life. Jacqueline disappeared as promised, withdrawing her complaint and vanishing from the legal scene entirely. My reputation was restored, my cases proceeded without incident, and life returned to what everyone else would consider normal. But I felt like I was sleepwalking through my days. Everything that had once given me satisfaction winning cases, building arguments, the cut and thrust of courtroom battle felt hollow without Cameron to share it with. I found myself looking for her in every courtroom, listening for her voice, in every hallway, hoping against hope that she might appear at Murphy's on Thursday nights. She never did. I threw myself into work with a vengeance that impressed even my colleagues. I took on more cases, worked longer hours, built an even more impressive conviction rate. But late at night, alone in my apartment, I'd find myself staring at the chess set on my dining room table, remembering the way Cameron's eyes would light up when she found a particularly clever move. It was during one of those sleepless nights, about 6 weeks after our confrontation with Jacqueline, that I finally understood what I had to do. I couldn't force Cameron to forgive me, couldn't make her trust me again through words alone, but I could show her through actions that I'd learned from my mistakes. The case that changed everything was a pro bono defense that landed on my desk through the public defender's office. A young woman named Maria Santos had been charged with embezzlement from her employer, but something about the case felt wrong from the moment I read the file. The evidence was circumstantial, the timeline didn't add up, and the defendant's story that she'd been set up by her supervisor to cover his own theft had the ring of truth. In the old days, I would have prosecuted the case as presented, trusting the police work and the evidence gathered by investigators. But Cameron had taught me to look deeper, to question assumptions, to consider that sometimes the obvious answer wasn't the right one. I spent weeks investigating the case from both sides, following leads that the police had dismissed, interviewing witnesses they'd overlooked. What I found was a pattern of financial irregularities that pointed not to Maria Santos, but to her. Supervisor, a man with gambling debts and a history of manipulating company records. The ethical thing to do would have been to dismiss the charges against Maria and turn my evidence over to the police so they could investigate the real culprit. But I wanted to do more than the ethical thing. I wanted to do the right thing, the thing Cameron would have done if she'd been Maria's attorney. I called Maria into my office on a Friday afternoon, 3 days before her trial was scheduled to begin. "Miss Santos," I said, gesturing for her to sit down, "I want to talk to you about your case." She looked terrified, this small woman who'd been caught in a web of lies and corruption, not of her making. "Am I going to jail?" "Not if I have anything to say about it," I replied. "Maria, I've been investigating your case, and I believe you're innocent. More than that, I believe I know who's really guilty." Her eyes filled with tears. "You believe me?" "I do. And I'm going to do everything in my power to prove it." What followed was one of the most unusual trials of my career. As the prosecutor, I was supposed to be arguing for Maria's conviction. Instead, I systematically dismantled the case against her, presenting evidence that pointed to her supervisor's guilt, calling witnesses who testified to his suspicious behavior, building a defense that her public defender couldn't have managed with his limited resources. The courtroom was packed with observers who'd heard about the prosecutor, who was essentially defending the defendant she was supposed to be convicting. It was unprecedented, probably career-damaging, and exactly the kind of principled stand that Cameron had been talking about for months. In the gallery, I spotted familiar faces, colleagues from the prosecutor's office who looked shocked and appalled. Reporters taking notes for what would undoubtedly be front-page legal news. And there, in the back row, Cameron. She'd been there for all 3 days of the trial, I realized, watching me essentially throw away everything I claimed to value for the sake of justice. Our eyes met across the courtroom, and for the first time in weeks, I saw something other than hurt and disappointment in her expression. The jury deliberated for less than an hour before returning a not guilty verdict. Maria Santos collapsed in tears, her family embraced her, and the courtroom erupted in chaos as reporters rushed to get statements and observers debated what they'd just witnessed. I packed up my files methodically, knowing that my career as a prosecutor was probably over, that I'd crossed a line that most of my colleagues would find unforgivable. But for the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. "That was quite a performance," a familiar voice said behind me. I turned to find Cameron standing at the prosecutor's table, looking elegant as always, but with something softer in her expression than I'd seen since our confrontation on the sidewalk. "It wasn't a performance," I said. "It was justice." No," she replied quietly. "That's what made it so extraordinary." We stood there for a moment, the courtroom emptying around us, and I felt the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us like a bridge I wasn't sure I was allowed to cross. "Cameron," I started. "Have dinner with me," she interrupted. "Tonight, we need to talk." The restaurant Cameron chose was small, intimate, the kind of place where lawyers went when they wanted to have conversations that couldn't be overheard. We sat across from each other at a corner table, and for the first few minutes, neither of us seemed to know how to begin. "You destroyed your career today," Cameron said finally. I shrugged, cutting into my salmon with more precision than necessary. "Maybe, or maybe I finally figured out what my career should actually be about, which is justice," I said simply. "Not convictions, not wins and losses, but actual justice. You tried to tell me that months ago, but I was too stubborn to listen." Cameron smiled, and it was the first genuine smile I'd seen from her in weeks. "You were always stubborn. It was one of the things I found most frustrating about you. Is," she corrected. Present tense. "Though I'm beginning to think it might also be one of the things I love about you." My heart stopped. "Love? Present tense?" Cameron set down her fork and looked at me directly. "Hope, what you did today, throwing away everything you thought you wanted for the sake of doing what was right, that took incredible courage." The kind of courage I wasn't sure you had. I've been thinking about what you said, I admitted. About trust, about how hard it is to repair once it's broken, and you were right. I did exactly what Jacqueline did to me, chose safety over love, career over connection. I became the person I promised myself I'd never become. And now, I took a deep breath, knowing that this was my moment, my chance to either rebuild what we'd had or lose it forever. Now I know that some things are worth the risk, that love isn't a luxury I can't afford. It's a necessity I can't live without. That having someone like you in my life, someone who challenges me to be better than I thought I could be, is worth more than any career success or professional reputation. Cameron was quiet for a long moment, studying my face like she was trying to read my thoughts. You realize that dating a defense attorney is going to complicate your life even more now, especially if you decide to switch sides yourself. Switch sides, she smiled, and this time it was the dangerous, confident smile I'd fallen in love with. Hope, after what happened today, do you really think the prosecutor's office is going to keep you on? You basically told the entire legal community that you care more about justice than job security. That's not exactly the kind of thinking they encourage in prosecutors. She was right, of course. I'd probably burned every bridge I had in the district attorney's office. But strangely, the thought didn't terrify me the way it would have just a few months ago. So, what are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that Allen and Brooks has a nice ring to it, Cameron said, her eyes sparkling. With mischief. Defense attorneys who actually give a damn about their clients, who fight for justice instead of just fighting to win. I stared at her, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. You want to go into practice together? I want a lot of things, Cameron said, reaching across the table to take my hand. I want to work cases that matter with someone I trust completely. I want to build something real and lasting and meaningful. And I want to do all of that with you if you're brave enough to take the leap. Her fingers were warm against mine, and I felt that familiar jolt of electricity, that sense of rightness that I'd been missing for weeks. What about trust? What about the fact that I hurt you, that I proved I was capable of choosing fear over love? What about the fact that you just proved the opposite? Cameron replied. Hope, today you risked everything for a stranger. You threw away your career for the sake of justice. If you can do that for someone you barely know, I think I can trust you to choose love over fear when it really matters. I brought her hand to my lips, pressing a soft kiss to her knuckles. I love you, Cameron Brooks. I love your brilliance and your passion and the way you make me want to be better than I am. And if you'll have me, if you'll give me another chance, I promise I won't run again. I love you too, Hope Allen, she said softly. Even when you're being an idiot, especially when you're being an idiot, actually. I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in months. So we're really going to do this? Professional partners and personal partners? We're going to do this, Cameron confirmed. Though I should warn you, I play to win, even when we're on the same side. I wouldn't expect anything less, I said, squeezing her hand. But just so we're clear, I still don't like to lose. Good, Cameron said, her smile turning wicked. That's going to make the makeup sex even better. I nearly choked on my wine. Cameron Brooks, you're going to be the death of me. I'm counting on it, she replied. The law office of Allen and Brooks was small but elegant, occupying the top floor of a converted brownstone in the Arts District. We'd painted the walls a warm cream color, filled the space with comfortable furniture and plenty of bookshelves, and hung our law degrees side by side on the wall behind the reception desk. It wasn't the corner office in a prestigious firm that we'd both once dreamed of, but it was ours, and it was perfect. Our first 6 months in practice had been challenging but rewarding. We'd taken on a mix of cases, some pro bono work for clients who couldn't afford representation, some paying clients who appreciated our thorough, ethical approach to defense work. We'd won more than we'd lost, built a reputation for being tough, but fair, and most importantly, we'd done work that actually mattered. The transition from adversaries to partners had been surprisingly smooth. We complemented each other well. My prosecutorial experience helped me anticipate the state's strategy, while Cameron's defense background ensured we never missed an opportunity to protect our clients' rights. We'd developed a rhythm, a partnership that was both professional and personal, and it worked. The personal side of our partnership was working pretty well too. Cameron had moved into my apartment after a month of spending most nights there anyway, and we'd fallen into an easy domestic routine that felt natural and right. She made coffee in the mornings while I walked to the corner bakery for pastries. I cooked dinner while she reviewed case files. We played chess on Thursday nights, though now the games often ended with pieces scattered across the floor as we found more interesting ways to occupy our time. It was on one such Thursday night, 6 months after our first case as partners, that Cameron surprised me with something I hadn't been expecting. We were in the middle of a particularly competitive game. I was up a rook, but Cameron had a positional advantage that was making me nervous when she suddenly stood up and walked to her briefcase. "Your move," I called after her, studying. "The board." "Actually," Cameron said, returning to the table with something hidden in her hand, "I think this is my move." She knelt beside my chair, and my breath caught as I realized what was happening. In her palm was a small velvet box, and inside the box was a ring, simple, elegant, perfect. "Hope Allen," Cameron said, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "You are the most infuriating, stubborn, brilliant woman I've ever known. You challenge me every day to be better, to fight harder, to never settle for anything less than justice. You're my best friend, my partner, my greatest love, and the person I want to spend the rest of my life arguing cases and playing chess with." I stared at the ring, then at Cameron's face, feeling my heart race with joy and surprise and absolute certainty. "Will you marry me?" she asked. I looked at the chessboard, at the game we'd abandoned, at the scattered pieces that represented all the battles we'd fought and won and lost together. Then I looked at Cameron, kneeling beside my chair with her heart in her eyes and a future in her hands. "Only if you let me propose to you next time," I said, sliding off the chair to kneel beside her. Her laugh was pure joy. "Is that a yes?" "That's a yes," I confirmed, kissing her as she slipped the ring onto my finger. "That's a hell yes." We made love that night, surrounded by chess pieces, on the living room floor where we'd first played our game of hearts and minds. And afterward, as we lay tangled together in the lamplight, Cameron traced lazy patterns on my skin and whispered plans for our future. "Church, wedding, or courthouse?" she asked. "Courthouse," I said without hesitation. "The place where we met, where we fought our first battle, where we learned to be on the same side." "I was hoping you'd say that," Cameron murmured against my throat. "Though we should probably warn the judge that we're planning to exchange." "More than just vows? What do you mean?" She grinned, that wicked, wonderful smile that had first captured my attention across a crowded courtroom. "Well, we'll need to file the paperwork to legally change our practice name to Allen Brooks, won't we?" I stared at her, then burst into laughter. "Cameron Brooks, you're absolutely perfect." "I know," she said smugly. "That's why you're marrying me." The courthouse was packed with more people than I'd expected for a simple civil ceremony. Marcus was there, beaming with pride and taking pictures with his phone. Maria Santos had come with her family, all of them dressed in their finest clothes to celebrate the woman who'd saved her freedom. Colleagues from our new practice filled the front rows, along with a handful of former adversaries who'd become friends and a surprising number of judges who'd presided over our cases. but I only had eyes for Cameron, standing at the front of the courtroom in a cream-colored dress that made her look like a goddess. She'd worn her hair down the way I liked it, and her smile was so radiant it could have powered the entire building. Judge Morrison, the same judge who'd presided over our very first case against each other, was performing the ceremony. She'd agreed to do it as a personal favor, and I could see the genuine happiness in her eyes as she looked at us. "We are gathered here today," Judge Morrison began, "to witness the union of Hope Allen and Cameron Brooks, two attorneys who have proven that even the fiercest opponents can become the strongest allies when love is involved." I felt Cameron's hand squeeze mine, and I squeezed back, thinking about the journey that had brought us to this moment. All the chess games and courtroom battles, all the fear and doubt and miscommunication that had nearly torn us apart, all the trust rebuilt and love rediscovered. "Hope," the judge said, turning to me, "do you take Cameron to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in victory and defeat, in arguments and agreements, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," I said, my voice strong and sure. "Cameron, do you take Hope to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold, in victory and defeat, in arguments and agreements, for as long as you both shall live?" "I do," Cameron replied, tears of joy sparkling in her eyes. "Then by the power vested in me by the state," Judge Morrison said with a broad smile, "I now pronounce you wife and wife. You may kiss the bride." Cameron didn't wait for a second invitation. She kissed me right there in front of everyone, deep and sweet and full of promise, while our friends and family cheered and applauded around us. When we finally broke apart, both breathless and laughing, Cameron whispered in my ear, "Checkmate, Mrs. Allen Brooks." "Checkmate," I agreed, kissing her again just because I could. Later, at the small reception we'd organized at our favorite restaurant, I found myself standing by the window watching Cameron work the room, charming our guests with stories and laughter. She caught me staring and excused herself from her conversation to join me, having second thoughts. She teased, slipping her arms around my waist. "Never," I said, pulling her closer. Though I have to admit, I'm still not entirely sure how this happened. 6 months ago, we were opponents. A year ago, I thought love was something I couldn't afford. And now, I looked at my wife, beautiful and brilliant and brave. The woman who taught me that some risks were worth taking, that some games were worth playing, that some opponents were really just partners waiting to be discovered. "Now I know that love isn't a luxury," I said, echoing the words I'd once feared. "It's the only thing that makes the rest of it worthwhile." Cameron's smile was soft, tender, full of all the love and promise of our future together. "You know what this means, don't you?" "What?" "We're going to have to find a new bar for chess night. Murphy's is too small now that we're both on the same side." I laughed, spinning her around in a circle that made her dress flare out like a flower. "We'll find somewhere new, somewhere we can start fresh, build new traditions." "As long as they have a good wine selection," Cameron said as I set her back on her feet. "And decent lighting for the chessboard." "Deal," I agreed. "Though I should warn you, now that we're married, I'm going to expect you to let me win occasionally." Cameron's laugh was rich and warm and full of mischief. "Hope Allen Brooks, if you think marriage is going to make me go easy on you, you've got another thing coming. I didn't fall in love with you because you were easy to beat. Why did you fall in love with me?" I asked, genuinely curious. She considered the question seriously, her fingers playing with the wedding ring on my left hand. "Because you're brilliant and stubborn and absolutely fearless when it comes to fighting for what's right. Because you make me want to be better than I am. Because when you finally stopped running from love, you ran toward it with everything you had. And because I'm devastatingly attractive," I added. trying to lighten the mood before I started crying happy tears all over my wedding dress. That too, Cameron agreed solemnly. Very important factor in my decision-making process. I kissed her then, right there by the window with our friends and family celebrating around us, sealing our partnership with a promise that felt bigger than words. We'd found each other across a crowded courtroom, fallen in love over chess games and legal arguments, survived betrayal and fear and our own stubborn pride. Now we had forever to perfect our game, to build a life that was both professional and personal, to prove that sometimes the best partnerships are born from the fiercest competitions. As we broke apart, both of us laughing and crying at the same time, I realized that Jacqueline had been wrong all those years ago. Love wasn't a luxury I couldn't afford. It was the only thing I'd ever truly needed. And I'd found it with a woman who could checkmate me at chess and in life, who taught me that the best victories weren't the ones you won alone, but the ones you shared with someone who understood that some games were worth playing for keeps.